Hello. Today is Sunday, December 5th, and this is Life Matters. Let's talk about it. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I am Michele Irby Johnson, and I am your host, and I want to welcome you to Life Matters. This is the platform where we talk about what matters in your life, particularly the African American community, not to be discriminatory, but just to make sure that we're telling our story from our people about our issues. And so if you have any questions, please, ma'am, please, sir, feel free to drop them in our chat and I will field them to our amazing guest who we have with us today, Dr. Cynthia J Hickman. Say hello to the people, my dear.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, being on wherever you might be. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, hello, and hello.
Hello, my dear. Hello. Once again, we are going to be talking to Dr. Cynthia Hickman today, and our topic is keeping the elderly in their homes. This is a vital discussion we're going to have. I'm hoping it's going to be a robust discussion that we're going to have. And I'm hoping you all will chime in and ask questions and, provide some type of a discussion that we can all learn from one another. But before we get started, I want to tell you all a little bit about this beautiful woman. Dr. Cynthia J Hickman is a proud retiree of St. Luke's Episcopal Hospital in Houston, Texas. She retired in 2013 after walking and sometimes running the halls, caring for patients and their families, first as a bedside nurse and then ending her tenure as a case manager for medical and interventional cardiology patients, Retirement occurred due to the need to take care of her aging mother, thinking, I can get another job. I cannot get another mother. Now, this is the truth anyhow. And so after retirement, Dr. Hickman, while the caregiver for her mother, she completed 2 degrees, a master's in nursing with a specialization in education, and her PhD in health services with a specialization in leadership from Walden University. Dr. Hickman has her speaker shoes on. Yes, she does. And the microphone in hand, waiting to share her experience on topics aligned with her lived experiences. She has spoken in intimate settings and at national conferences, sharing proactive strategies that will support others in navigating caregiving challenges while celebrating the role's successes. Welcome, my dear sister, Dr. Cynthia J Hickman.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm so glad to be with you today. What an honor. What an honor. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I am so excited. We got you on the roll earlier this year, and I'm so glad that we are able to have this very important discussion. And as I was sharing you at the top of, before we actually went live, about my husband and I relocating to another state to be closer to my mother. Now she still has her wits about her and things of that nature, but she is getting older and there are some needs that she has. And, we wanted to be closer, in case there were any medical emergencies, because I recall back in 2012 when I got the phone call that she had a heart attack and needed open heart surgery. And I had to drive 7 hours, or catch a train rather, 7 hours to get to her before she had her surgery. So I'm very intimate with this discussion, and I'm so excited about what we're going to talk about today, which is keeping the elderly in their homes. So let me first ask you. So I know that you, from your bio, you took care of your mother. Do you want to give us a little highlight about what that was like before we jump into the core of our discussion?
Sure. So my mother, Shibbolethia B. Lewis, that's my queen. She was like you when you said 77 years. That's when my mother came to live with me at the age of 77, because she lived by herself. The journey per se in the beginning was really a hands-off, observational type situation,
Mm-hmm.
being that she was able to motivate. When she came to me, she actually was driving. She was going to the grocery store. She was attending a senior citizen center. And so, as long as she was doing those types of things without intervention, we were outside looking in, because we wanted her to maintain as much independence as she wanted to maintain. And that is so important with elderly.
It
Now, of
is.
course, my mother moved from her home into our home, and being somewhere for 50 years and making that adjustment to a whole nother state, a whole nother environment, is a conversation all by itself. So when you talked about your mom still having the wits about her, she's, on her own right now, you took the blinders off. And I say that to people sometimes because you paid attention to what you were looking at. And one of the challenges that people don't realize, if you don't pay attention, things happen. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that you took a step in the right direction. Now, mom, her care really got hands on, I'd say, about the last 5 years of her life. And that wasn't necessarily real detail. She had bradycardia, which is a cardiac function. She needed a pacemaker. She got the pacemaker in, and she was off, doing her thing again. She did have to have bilateral knee surgeries, and we went through that, and she was up walking again. Now, the change came, Michelle, after the knee surgeries,
Yeah.
because she walked on her own. And so she was able to still continue to walk, but we had to start dealing with adaptive aids. And so when you deal with adaptive aids, again, you have to take the blinders off, because although it may be supporting the person, you have to look at as it's supporting the person in the current and new environment. So it does change things a little bit.
Yeah.
So, that, and then, of course, toward the end of her life, when we had to do hospice from a hospitalization, of course, then it's hands on, all hands on deck, family involved, and those sorts of things. So it's important to think about, when you made the comment about your mom, I tell people, take the blinders off right now, because what the blinders being off will allow you to see what you might not want to accept. The
Exactly.
hardest part for me, Michelle, was realizing that I became my mother's mother, because I was now her caregiver. And
Mm.
you always want mommy to be mommy. And when that role really changed in plain sight, that became the really challenge of being a caregiver.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you said the part about her still, your mother still being able to be mobile and that independence. And we've, like I stated earlier in our conversation in the green room, my mother says she wants to stay in her home as long as possible. She likes that independence. But I know that she was making comments, to her girlfriends. I call them her golden girls, to her girlfriends, who most of them are moving away to live with their children or be closer to their children, or some of them have passed away. And so she mentioned several times down through the years that none of her children lived close to her. All of
Mhm,
us were 7 hours away. All of
mhm,
us lived in Maryland. And
mhm,
so I heard her, I
mhm,
kept hearing her say that. And then, she had a fall, and, just different things like that. And so it made my heart um, open up to the fact that I say, you know what, we're too far away if something
mhm,
happens. So I had a conversation with my husband, and he agreed. And so now we're like 25 minutes, maybe a little less from
mhm.
her now. So at least we're accessible. We
Right,
can get to her, she can get to us, or whatever the case
right.
may be. But that independence is so
Mhm,
vitally important, because I think when an elderly person feels that they are relegated to a rocker, if I can say it that way,
mhm.
life kind of stops for them, and they
Yeah.
start to feel like they're useless, and
Mhm,
they don't want to be taken care of in the sense of I'm not gone yet. Let me do what I want to do. So I'm glad you said that part about being independent.
Mhm.
And so with your mother having to use the aids, did she start to feel her independence going, or did you all let her navigate those things on her own until she just couldn't anymore?
Right. I tried to let her be uh, the speaker in the matter. I tried to let her say when she needed this, that, and the other. And the one thing that she would say, when she started saying, "Oh, I came out of the bedroom and I forgot my cane," and I noticed her navigating through the house, holding on the back of furniture, on the
Mm,
way to the kitchen, holding on to the counter, those sorts of things. So when I noticed that when she started asking, "Oh, I forgot my cane," and then when she had to start using her walker, the walker wasn't left behind too much. But again, there's times when she was trying to challenge the fact that she didn't want the walker either. And she'd get so far and she'd hold on to a wall or something and she says, "I forgot my walker." Well, go get my walker, because in her mind, the mind is still saying, "I got it going on."
yeah,
The body has a whole nother agenda, And so I tried to let her be the captain of that ship, because what happens when you let them be the captain of the ship, they're much more engaged in accepting the realities of what they're facing. So
yeah,
I think that's very important to pay attention to. If we push everything toward them, "Mama, you're leaning. You need to get a walker. You need to get a cane. You need to tell me, you need to tell me before you want to get up out of the chair so you don't fall." All those things are negative in the mindset of someone who has been independent all their life, and now they're seeing themselves differently.
yeah, yeah.
I think it's important that you encourage from afar, let them be the driver of those changes that we know are coming if they haven't showed up already.
That's very key. And I'm glad you said that, because and I'm going to keep using my mother as a reference,
Sure, sure.
because, you know, we're getting there. Again, she still drives, she still takes her trips with her Golden Girls and things like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But having the blinders off helps me to see, okay, in 4 years, she's going to be 80. And,
Hmm.
in such and such, she's going to be that. And, God's grace be applied, she'll still be able to be independent, but I still
Right.
have to be very wise and understanding that she's going this way and not that way.
Correct.
And so helping them to be that driver, I think, is so key, because we don't want them to start feeling like um, we don't trust their judgment,
Right.
or that we feel like they're incapable.
Hmm.
And like you
Hmm.
said, the mind says one thing, the body says another thing, but to them, they're like, I don't want to be taken care of. And that is so key, that we listen to them, and
Yes.
that we add um, our heart to it without being,
Yes.
you know, uh, bossy, and,
Hmm.
well, you need to
Yes.
do this and you need to do that, because
Hmm.
that's going to push them further
Further
away. And
away. Yeah.
that's the last thing we want to
Hmm.
do. We have a question talking about aging in place.
Hmm.
And I think that's pretty much what my
What
mother
we
is
talk.
saying.
Hmm.
She wants to age in place. How do we plan for um, the elderly who want to plan who want to age in place, particularly if they have a two-story house
Hmm.
and now they're up in
Hmm.
age? Walk us through the process of how do they make those changes to be able to navigate that independence
Right.
while aging in place.
There's several ways of looking at that, Michelle. When you say aging in place, the first thing comes to mind to most people is they want to stay where they are. So that means that we have to talk about their village, their support systems. Because
Hmm.
for an older person who wants to stay in their own place, that means that somebody's going to have some change. And of course, we know change is difficult. And when we have our own lives going on, when we think change, that means who is your village? If there is there children involved, and who's going to step up to the plate to allow mom, dad to stay in their own environment? That's the first thing. And so, willingness to give up what you're accustomed to is not easy for people.
Right.
I recall when I left my job to take care of mom full time, it happened so fast that I didn't process it. What I processed was going away to a nursing conference and coming home and her looking different. And although I had given clear directions to those who were taking care of her They did not have the nursing background to pay attention to certain things. I don't fault them for that because they did their best with what they had and what their understanding of what I shared with them.
Yeah.
But when that particular event occurred, I had to make some changes. So quit my job that I loved, my patients, my hospital, all that I did, but it didn't matter. So I had to make that decision of change. Now, initially, it wasn't difficult because it happened so fast I couldn't think about it. But as I processed the reality of what I was doing and what needed to occur, that part got very interesting. So for aging in place, that means that somebody's going to have to move,
Yeah.
or and someone's going to have some financial wherewithal to fix some things and change some things. And that means that the village around the person who wants to age in place needs to come together. Again, it goes back to taking those blinders off. When you have siblings or people who are in your village, then the conversation needs to be started way before we get to the question of mama wants to age in place.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
mama wants to age in place, but what have we planned for or what have we discussed for mom to age in place? Does that make
Exactly.
sense?
It absolutely does because again, going back to that village, like I said, my mother, she has her golden girls around her, but they're older than her and she's in her 70s,
Mm-hmm.
her late 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when she told me, because she and I and my husband had a conversation and we were talking about some of the things we can do in a couple of years to make sure she's comfortable and all that. And then she came back, she said, if at all possible, I would like to stay in my home as long as possible. Now, the blessed thing is she lives in a one level townhouse. It's like three of them stuck together, but they're all one
Mm-hmm.
level.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes that decision easier for me because I'm like, if she lived in a two-story or she had to navigate, 8 steps to get up to her one level, then those
Mm-hmm.
are some things I would have to think about.
Correct.
But
Correct.
again, the blessing is she walks right into her
Her home.
home and everything's on one level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of helping them to uh, customize the inside of their homes,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's one level or not, like
Mm-hmm.
one thing, she has a bathtub that is very high and we're going to have to think about that. Maybe a walk-in will have to be
Mm-hmm.
installed at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So
Or
talk.
showers now with shower chairs,
Yeah.
so she can sit and still be independent in that arena and still
Hmm.
take care of herself. Bathtubs are a no for older people for several reasons. Of course, getting in, getting out, but even the fact that they're wet, they're slippery, and the best person uh, can fall and slip
Absolutely.
in a bathtub.
Absolutely.
So I would not even consider a bathtub unless there's a whole bunch of people, the village, around to help them in and help them out. And
Exactly.
I would strongly encourage mama, don't ever take a bath when I'm not around. Don't
Yeah.
ever take a bath when nobody's around. That's an accident waiting to happen. Now those types of conversations need to be stern. And that's when you have to be very careful about what, like we talked about earlier, do this, do the other. There's some things that you do have to put your foot down on because it all talks about safety. So there are things you have to say, don't do that. It's not up for discussion, it's not up for debate. Don't do that. And you
Exactly.
tell them why, and it's merely safety. Now, in the home, again, like you mentioned, aging in place, Michelle, the other side of this coin is what is the navigation around the home?
Exactly.
Because you have to look at furniture. I tell the example of um, people being on a blood thinner, Coumadin, taking heparin, whatever, and it's so easy for them to bump a corner of a table
And get bruised.
and get bruised, and you don't
Hmm.
pay attention to that, and then over time things happen.
Yeah.
So that means that those who had pointed square tables, they need to make them round. You need to
Hmm.
eliminate things where points can cause problems. And so those types of things you have to think about. And typically, oh, that's a nice table, my set is all that and what have you. But it really thinks you really have to think about how to rearrange furniture and how to eliminate furniture that may cause people to fall and hurt themselves. The other thing is throw rugs.
Yeah.
Older people with throw rugs, and Granny loved them. All the old people had a throw rug under every chair, under every table, you name it, it was a throw rug, right? In the
Hmm.
bathroom, dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. And those
Wow.
really need to be removed.
Wow.
Because if they're walking with any type of adaptive aids, and
Mm,
a walker, a cane, a quad cane, anything that can just get tripped up under there, that's a serious fall. And God forbid
absolutely.
if they're home alone.
Yeah, yeah. And my mother, she lives alone. And again, she's still able-bodied. I mean, she's gets a little slow with some things, but she's still able-bodied. And I know she's watching this. I love you, mommy.
I love you,
Um,
mommy.
um, but I think about stuff like that. I
Yeah.
think of like my husband and I, we went to her house the week of Thanksgiving and delivered some groceries to her. And I have a key. Her car was in the driveway, walked all through the house, couldn't find her, calling her on her cell phone. She wasn't answering. I was like, okay, the devil, I went straight into pastor mode, went straight into prayer. I said, where is my mother? But she was at a friend's house, but you know, the
And she
friend's
didn't
house,
tell you, right? And you didn't know
huh?
it. And she didn't tell you, and you didn't know it.
No, and again, we came unannounced, but even still, her car was in the driveway, her purse was in the house,
Mhm.
but the house was empty. And I looked at
Mhm.
my husband, I said, where is this chick? Where did
Mhm.
she go?
Mhm. But but Michelle, you know what? That's a prime example of being very careful about saying to mama, I know you're independent. I know you got it going on, but when you leave the house, will you just shoot me a message and let me know? Because again, you never know. Now, like you said, she's living life like it's golden. We love it. But you see how the anxiety did you just that one incident?
Look, it took me to the roof. I remained calm, but inside I was like panicking. And
Mm-hmm.
she was like, oh, I was at such and such house. Now the house where she was visiting was across the street. Now, because my mother's lived there for 14 years, the lady across the street, when she's home, her garage is always up.
Mm.
That day her garage door was down, so to me I'm thinking she's
Mm-hmm.
not there, so I didn't
Yep.
even think to go across the street to
Mm-hmm.
look for her. She's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I was fine. I said, I didn't know that.
Mhm. There, and that's the point, and that's where you start having this conversation that
Ooh,
they don't want to hear per se, but you say it in love because you have to be empathetic to the fact that they want to be independent and stay there as long as they can. So
yeah,
if they want to be independent, agent in place, then we have to look at their environment and see how we can make it as safe as possible until we can no longer make it as safe as possible with them staying in it alone.
yeah, yeah. And again, like I said, she still cooks and does laundry and cleans and all these different things. And again, not getting too much into her personal business, but she has her limitations. And so that to me as a daughter, I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, mommy, what'd you do
And tell
today?
me where the dishes are, and tell me where the microwave is. And does she use the microwave? And is the microwave above the stove where she puts something in to heat up
Hmm.
and has to take it down? And as
Hmm.
we age, your muscles in your hands, your fine motor skills, your gross motor skills, they age with no fault on your own. They still age. So
Yeah,
her lifting maybe to get something out of the microwave one day, and she might think she has it, and it's hot, and he pulls it out. So those are all things that we don't think about because they're habits that we do all the time,
yeah.
and we don't think those habits could turn into a problem, and they can with an aging person.
They happen with me. And
There you go. I didn't want to say it. I'm gonna tell you, I walked in the kitchen the other day and couldn't remember what I went there for.
look, I do that all the time. I'll say to my husband, I said, what did I come in here for? I said, I don't
There
even
you
remember.
go.
So I have to turn around, and in my turning, I get reminded. But
There you go.
anyway, I
Mhm.
digress. But yes, I want to make sure, and I'm so grateful that I'm closer to her now
Yeah.
than those 7 hours being away. So when we think about, okay, we've talked about aging in place. We talked a little bit about keeping things safe in their home. Um, what about, uh, you know, keeping them active? Now, my mother, she goes to the gym. She walks on the treadmill or around the little flat track that they have for
Mhm.
about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then she comes home. But it's in a place where it's a cardiac unit where people,
Okay.
who've had heart attacks or what have you. And so she goes to the gym. and sometimes I'm like, okay, well, who was there, because I only have one of her girlfriend's phone numbers. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to ask her. It's like, okay, I need a list of all of your
There you
girlfriend's
go.
numbers, so if I can't find you when you decide you want to take a trip down the street, I
Mhm.
can call them and say, hey, is my mother with you?
Mhm.
But and again, not taking away her independence,
No,
but
it's just
understanding,
concern.
needing her to understand that, okay,
Right.
ma'am, I
Mhm.
need
Leave
you
it
to tell
alone,
me where
ma'am.
you
And we're concerned about you because we love you and we want you to keep going and doing what you're doing. But please take a minute to let us know that you're safe. And that's really what you're asking.
That's all I'm
So
asking.
they just have to understand that this is truly about concern for your safety and your care. It's not about trying to know who you're going with and how long you're going to stay.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I love you, mommy. Like I said, I know she's watching. So we've talked about the safety. We talked about the throw rugs because she has throw rugs. One
Mhm.
thing for me, I think about in terms of the space when you were saying moving furniture around, God forbid if she ever had to use a wheelchair,
Mhm.
those type of things, expand,
Mhm.
creating space where you can just walk right into a room,
Mhm.
or and when I go in her house now, in my mind I'm thinking, is this wide enough for a wheelchair? Will she be able to get into her laundry room? Will she be able to do, and again, I'm not putting her anywhere closer to her demise.
Mhm.
I'm just
Mhm.
thinking
No, you're thinking out loud. Sure.
out loud in my,
Mhm.
in my heart,
Mhm.
saying, okay, would she be able to do XYZ? Because even in our home, my husband and I, we bought a home, we moved down here, I quit my job, well, I worked here for a minute until
Mhm.
they started going back face to face, and we looked at our home that we purchased and like, mom can't come live here. Even
Mhm.
though it's a ranch, there are like 6 steps to get up,
Yeah. Yeah.
the driveway's on an incline,
Mhm.
think about all these different things. I said we would have to move in
Yeah.
order to bring her in
Mhm.
to
Or
our
do the
home.
adaptive aids that allow her to get in and out, which means there's ramps that you have to put in place, handrails that you have to put in place. There are things that you can do. There are driveway ramps. There's step ramps. There's things you can do to that nature where she could accommodate in. But then again, as she gets older, you'd really have to pay attention to see if she could do that on her own versus
Mhm.
need assistance with you all every time she would need to get in the house and out of the house. So those are things that are possible so she can stay with you. But again, it takes the financial piece to put that in place. The other thing is you mentioned doors. I'm glad you did that because back before 1985, I think it's the date, wheelchair accessible entrances were issued.
Yeah.
The same thing applies because no one realized that nobody thought about somebody would use a wheelchair and have to navigate in and out of their house. So it is important to pay attention to the new uh,
88 rules.
guidelines and rooms for people getting in and out if they need accessibility to these various rooms and doors even in their house. The other thing, the first thing that you'd have to get rid of in a house for space wise would be coffee tables. The
I
very
don't have
nice
one.
coffee table with the flowers in the middle. If mom has that, because they take up the room because it's there. But that's
Mhm.
that's one piece of furniture would have to go.
Yeah.
Uh, in thinking of space,
Yeah.
you know, and so that's another thing. So really, what ends up happening is how your house is manned. Everything needs to go against a wall, so you have space,
Mm.
for people to navigate through. And those are all logistics based on, how the house is made. But it's all about you have to always think safety, no matter what, Michelle. Safety, safety, safety. Um, but the thing of it is, even with the safety aspect, everybody is not tuned in to what that means because what happens is we reactive. We
Yeah.
talk about that. I talk about that many times as being a proactive caregiver advocate because the goal for what I'm doing on my journey is let's talk about being proactive because the reactive side sometimes has causes consequences that we can't undo.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's very important that I say take the blinders off because we have to be able to see a bigger picture and start navigating in that big picture so we don't have situations that we could possibly avoid. And there are some that we could avoid if
Yeah.
we pay attention to what's going on. Grateful to you because you saw that you needed to move. And that's really what we're saying to our audience. Really look at who is the elderly in your environment and look at what you need to do to change it. So if they choose to age in place, how is that looking and is that safe?
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is the ability to change even when it's difficult,
Mm.
because we know that it is. If we know that we all are selfish in our own journeys of how we've come to however we are. And so for us to give it up because we need to be responsible for someone else, that truly is why caregiving needs to be a conversation every day versus every year. Because we're getting older every day of our lives. It's not changing. I tell people none of us, Michelle, are gonna get out of here alive.
No.
So, so we might as well, as we're pilgrims passing through, let's do some things proactively that we can prevent reactive situations that will cause us more harm and problems than we really want to be bothered with.
Amen. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are talking to Dr. Cynthia J. Hickman, and we are discussing the topic, the very important topic of keeping the elderly in their homes. And we're talking about the safety aspect, and we're talking about the sacrifices that many have to make sure that their loved ones are cared for as they are aging in place. And there was something that you said, Dr. Hickman, when we were talking about the reactive approach.
Mhm,
And a lot of people will do that. They will wait till there's nothing else left to do. And I'm not saying the person is in a hospital bed in the house or something like that, but they'll jump and say, hey, we're just going to move you to Pennsylvania with us. And they don't ask the
mhm,
elderly, they don't ask their mother or their father or their auntie or Grammy, you
mhm,
know, is this okay? This is what we want to discuss with you. They just pack them up
mhm,
and just shift them into trauma mode because
mhm,
they're, like you said, move them from someplace they've been for 20 years, 30 years,
mhm,
50 years,
mhm,
because you're being reactive instead of saying, okay, by the end of this year, there's going to be a different need. How do we make the adjustment slow enough that
mhm.
they know it's coming, but make it all the same?
Right.
And so, talk to us about that planning. We've already done the planning with my mother.
Mhm,
We've got the
mhm.
estate planning done. We've got all of those different things. But the planning of making that decision to shift,
Right. Right.
that decision to move, like you said, it's difficult. And
Mhm, mhm,
everybody does not, if you have three siblings, you have to decide which one is going to move to where mommy
mhm,
is, or where daddy is, or
mhm,
is he or she coming in, or you going out? Talk
mhm.
to us about what that looks like from a realistic perspective, um, in making that shift. Like you said, you quit your job. I left my job, but I moved down here and I was remote until they said, okay, everybody comes back face to face. And so they had to terminate me because I'm in another state. So all of those things come,
Mhm.
they require some well thought out
Yes,
planning. So
true.
can you walk us through, give us like a generic step by step plan, if mama is getting up in age and you see it, what does that look like? Because I don't think people really grasp.
Right, right. I agree with you. So let me tell you how we did it. I have four sisters. We're the alphabet kids. Let's see, Anita, Brenda, Cynthia, and Diane. And of course, I'm the cutest. I'm the cutest. But one of the things that we did, we let Mama visit Texas off and on. So my sister's in Texas, was in Texas initially, Diane, before I got here. And so Mom would come visit. When I moved to Texas, Mom would come visit. She stayed, here, there, and everywhere. She would go back and forth, but it was introducing her to the what if. And so by her coming to visit back and forth, then it allowed her to see where it was going to happen. And it allowed her to see how she could still navigate independently as she wanted to and still know that she would be in a safe environment.
Mm,
So, visiting, if they have to leave actual geographic locations, like a whole nother state, visits are very important. Looking at things that you can involve them with. We found a senior citizen center that she just fell in love with. Now, the thing with the senior citizen center, for some reason, this is a clue to me that people who are aging have not truly accepted it. When you hear someone say, I ain't going to no senior citizen center, I ain't old, in their mind, they're thinking those are old people hanging in the chair like this, can't see, somebody's feeding them, they can't go to the bathroom on their own. And that's none of that is the truth. Now you might have one or two people in the environment like that, but for the most part, these are active bodies who look for arts and crafts, looks for going to bingo, looks for going for outings, and these types of facilities realize that aging people need interactions. I used to take my mother to the Houston Zoo here. I'm sorry, the Houston Museum. There's a children's museum because my mom was a science teacher.
Mm.
And my sister and I took her to the Science Museum. And one of the events at the Science Museum was a area where you could do uh, eye and hand coordination. So we took mine where she could put a square peg and a square hole, round peg and a round hole, so on and so forth. And I noticed on this visit that she was sliding them in versus putting them in directly. And I made the comment to her, "You are acting old. They're the hole, they're the peg, put it in." But really, what I was paying attention to was her vision. And
Mm.
sure enough, she had cataracts. When I looked back at what was going on, took her to the eye doctor. She had cataracts. We got the cataracts removed, and everything was fine. So when you think about these activities for older people, find what their passion is. What did they do when they worked? What kind of things did they do when they were in their wonder years? Did they like reading? Did they like going on trips? And you find these little mini trips. Because mom was new to Texas, we took her around to show us what goes on in Texas. We went to the Alamo, we went to the spaceship, we went to NASA, we went to all these different places because as a science teacher, these things helped her stay engaged.
Right.
So it's very important to find what they like and encourage that because
Hmm.
that helps them stay engaged as they age without feeling like they're just going to go somewhere, sit in a chair, and that's the end of the story. So
Yeah.
always find activities. Always find activities. They don't have to be major. They don't have to be expensive. But I think that helps the elderly people know or the aging people know that there's still things out there that you can enjoy.
Hmm.
It's not about sitting in the chair looking out of the window.
Exactly. And
Hmm.
it's not about, excuse me, it's not about feeling like you're wasting away.
Correct.
My mother does a lot of what do you call it, word find puzzles,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
she has an iPad that has
Hmm.
certain games for
Hmm.
that eye to, that eye coordination type of
Hmm.
thing. So when I ask her, I said, "What do you?" She's, "Oh, I'm just playing a game on my," and I'm like, "Good," because it keeps you thinking, it keeps your
Correct.
mind nimble, and
Correct.
so things like that. And so there are things that she still does. We took her to my husband and I took her to the aquarium.
Okay.
I think it was earlier this year or maybe last year. I can't even remember because this pandemic has my
I
dates
know. Me
all
too.
messed up.
Me too.
But so we try to involve her in
Yes.
things with us and not just with her golden
Right.
girls,
Right.
because we moved down here for her.
Hmm.
Um, but so I'm glad that you mentioned the part about finding things that they're interested in
Hmm. Yeah. Not
and
what you're interested in, what they're interested in,
what
and
they're
you learn
interested.
their interest. My mother, you mentioned game. My mother and I, we played Scrabble a lot. We went and bought the high tech Scrabble board that turned around and all that. And it was kind of funny because mother would watch. She would play the Scrabble game, and I'd see this, and I think, what's going on? I'm studying the words. She
She
was
was
sleeping.
asleep. She was
I said,
napping between
what
work.
word you trying to find? You know, but that was like it was like some of the things that you do is like, okay, well at least you engaged. So it's very important, Queen Michelle, that they make sure that you whatever they like, then do it.
Yeah, my mom, they used to play dominoes every Friday before the
Hmm.
pandemic. I don't know if they've gotten back to that, but we went and bought the same game. So we're
Hmm.
going to have to start scheduling that.
Yeah.
Just bring it, and whenever, we're at the house, we'll just throw the bones on the table and
Hmm.
just play dominoes. But she always wins, so I don't know. Um
Uh oh.
she
Uh oh.
she always wins, or she wins. I'll say she'll win 95% of the time. It could be eight of
Wow.
us playing and she always seems to win. I'm like,
Wonder how
okay,
she
ma'am.
gets all the best dominoes, huh?
Yeah,
Something with that, huh?
something's up
Wow.
with that. I'm like, okay, I'm about to
Wow.
check your
Yeah.
pockets. No,
But
but
activities is so important as people age.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have a couple of more questions. Is government assistance, well, this one says, is it a good or bad thing? But I want to ask, is it available in terms of like helping people, say for instance, if they don't want to go to a senior citizen home, is there any type of assistance to help find housing? And the reason I'm asking this,
Mm,
and this was like, I want to say about maybe 10, 12 years ago. And my mother was looking at this senior living place that's not far from where she is now. And they wanted like $3,000 a month for a 1 bedroom. And it, of course, it was all inclusive, all three meals, nursing, nursing staff, all of these different things. But I'm like, if your retirement money is less than $3,000 a month, how do you supplement that so
mhm,
that you can still live where you are? Now, thank the Lord, my mother can afford where she lives, but I'm saying for other people outside of that,
mhm,
because there are those who they didn't work 35 years, in one place, or
mhm,
they didn't get all of the points they needed for retirement. And so
mhm,
now all they have is a social security check.
mhm.
What are some of the, if what are some of the resources out there for some of our elderly who want to stay in their home, and perhaps they can't afford the food, the medicine, and the utilities?
Mhm.
You
There
know what I
is,
mean?
oh yeah, I understand. And there are agencies in every state. The one that comes to mind, of course, everybody's heard of AARP. They have an excellent, excellent resource repository of information. The other one that people gloss over for some reason, and it's probably because they don't know, the Area Agency on Aging. Every state has one. Area Agency on Aging. And that is a phenomenal organization that helps guide people in various perspectives. Now, the financial piece, when you were speaking of, I do know of this, what it sounds like you were speaking of is called an assisted living arrangement. Now, assisted a living arrangement is an arrangement where you're self sufficient for the most part, but they provide your medications, they take care of your laundry and your uh, you know what do you call them, the short term type of things, but you're independent, but you pay for that. And most people in assisted livings have retirements. They just have retirements, and the retirements take care of $3,000 a month. The other side of it is, I don't know if you ever heard this before, some people will start selling their houses to their families in lieu of, because they don't have a well rounded financial income, so that when they start asking for federal funds, then they can say, I don't have a house, I don't have a car, I don't have a plane, I don't have a boat. And then they end up getting Medicare and Medicaid together, and then those help them with some degree. But now that's when you see people going into nursing homes
Mm,
because they can't afford that. And I would never encourage that. My mother would never go. We talked about that was never going to be an option for
that's
me.
not an option.
So I realize people have made those choices. But when you do that, whatever financial monies that the person has, it now goes to that entity of whoever is now taking care of them.
Yeah,
So resources are very, I don't want to say scarce, but I think there's resources that are out there, but people have to use the agencies to get the certain device because all states are not the same. How they set up are not the same. So I think it's a state by state situation. But I would start with AARP. I would start with Area on Aging and the National Alliance of Aging also. The National Alliance of Aging. And I think they work real close with AARP. And they also have insights into helping the elderly. The other thing I want people to think about in communities, I don't think people realize this, there's what they have volunteer respite care. Now, I'm not saying respite as in someone's needing end of life care. Someone who's in the home that you might have a little concern about staying alone. And you
mhm,
can call someone and say, I want to run to the grocery store, or I have a doctor's appointment. Can I find some? Can you have somebody in your circle that has time to spend 2, 3, 4 hours with, my mother while I go do those types of things?
mhm.
There's a lot of community resources out there. And I think sometimes people are ashamed to ask. I'm not quite sure why they are sometimes, but
Pride.
some, is that what it is? Okay.
Hmm.
Well, when it comes to taking care of our loved ones, no such answer.
Yeah.
You do what you need to do for the sake of them and really for the sake of you, because we didn't talk about the self-care part of it is, but while you're taking care of someone, if you don't take care of yourself, that's another story as well.
Yeah.
So please encourage, I'd like to encourage, our listeners to look up those agencies and at least make a phone call. If they don't know, they'll direct you. Also, social services departments are around the globe. There's social workers who have tons of resources on trying to help you as well. I worked with wonderful social workers when I was a case manager, and we were able to help a lot of patients who were stuck, in various little loopholes that they didn't know how to navigate. So,
Mm.
social service areas also call them and ask the questions. If they don't know the answers, they have the resources to help you as well.
Wonderful. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Dr. Cynthia J. Hickman, and we are talking about keeping our elderly in their homes. If you want to reach out to her, if you want to invite her to come and speak about self caregiving, if you want to have a conversation at your church or in your job or what have you, reach out to Dr. Cynthia J. Hickman. Her website is www.cynthiajhickman.info, and her email is drcynthia@cynthiajhickman.info. Reach out to her if you have questions. She is a guru. This is what she does. She has written several books. Um, one of her books is From the Lens of a Daughter, Nurse, and Caregiver, A Journey of Duty and Honor. You can get that on Amazon.com. And she also has the Black Book of Important Information for Caregivers. You can also get that on Amazon.com. Again, we are talking to none other than my beautiful sister, Dr. Cynthia J. Hickman, and we are talking about keeping the elderly in their homes. This is a very robust conversation, and it is something that we all need to think about. We can't be afraid of it. We can't step away from it. We can't think that it's somebody else's conversation. No. And particularly in our African American community, I'm going to put that right there on the table. We don't talk enough about what's going on. We don't talk enough about the reality of life and the circle and cycle of it. And so I think it's important that we lean into these conversations, hear it, even though it's a tough conversation, and then move forward. We have another question from our audience that says, how does the caregiver or family member protect the elderly from predators, especially spam callers? You have people who call and they're saying they're from the social security place, and they scare them, saying, if you don't pay this bill, we're going to kick you out of your house. And if the person is gullible and they live alone, they fall for these scams. How do we
Mhm.
protect them from that?
We have to tell them that these agencies never
They
call
never
you.
call.
They never they never call you. They
They never call
never
you.
call you. And
Mm-mm.
so, you know, they never call you. And so again, family has to remind their loved ones that the IRS never calls you. The Social Security Department never calls you. They never call you. And so you have to just remind our elderly population to don't entertain those types of calls. You just have to
Amen.
tell them don't entertain them, because we know we live in a world of scam. It's gotten so ridiculous, but we just have to protect them and tell. And the other part that is we have to start knowing about our family's financial aspects too. You
Yeah.
mentioned estates. We have to know what's going on with mom and dad, grandma, and we have to go at it at a way, Michelle, where we're not trying to get in their business. They have to understand it, because I'm sure there's families where there's hoping somebody fall over so you can get whatever it is you're trying to get. But when you find out who is the guru of the family as far as being responsible in that way, then you have to know. I knew everything. My mother had the black book, the green box, and I knew what was going on, and I knew what to do because I knew what she asked me to do.
Yeah.
But that was a conversation we had at 77, 78, 79,
Yeah.
not at 98 or
Yeah.
not at 95, when she can't really, think about it all. So
Mm.
again, these are very proactive steps that needs to occur now if you're in that space.
Exactly. And I'm glad you said, because I do a webinar and people they don't seem to pick up on it too well. I do a webinar called estate planning, and it's,
Mhm,
so I help people with their wills. I walk them through this hour and a half conversation that they need to have with
mhm,
themselves, who have with their family members, their loved ones. And so I had this conversation with my mother, and we
mhm,
put together all of her documents. So
mhm,
I'm her power of attorney, I'm her
mhm,
executor of state. She
mhm.
added me to her bank account.
There you
We were
go.
talking about her adding, me to the deed of her house, not the loan, but the deed. Because if anything happens, God forbid, you don't want the state to go in and start,
Absolutely.
rummaging through
Absolutely.
your loved one's life and doing what they
Absolutely.
will. And so we have put everything in place to make sure if
Mhm,
anything happens, again, God forbid, I
mhm.
already know what to do. I
What
know
to do.
where the
Mhm,
important documents are. I
mhm,
know
mhm,
where the signed papers are. I know
mhm,
where the life insurance policy is.
mhm,
I know what she wants to happen with her house. I know
mhm,
all of this. And
mhm.
again, in our community, we would much rather have a GoFundMe page, I said it, than to be, administratively prepared. And so
Instead
I'm
of being proactive.
proactive, absolutely. And so I'm putting it out there. This is what I do. I have these webinars that help people to understand it's necessary. Even my
Necessary.
son, he's just turned 28, but he's had life insurance since he was 6 months.
Yep, there
you
you
know
go.
and so I told him about 2 months ago, I said, here's your paperwork, here's your
Mhm,
will, read it over, sign it,
mhm,
here's your
mhm,
this, here's your that. His
mhm,
computer broke, so he hasn't been able to do it. But you
mhm,
know
mhm,
he's 28. I said, I need to have all of your documents in my hands. So if anything happens to you, you live in California. If something
mhm.
happens, nobody over there would know what to do, but I will
Right,
fly there and handle it, whatever.
right,
But
right.
again, we have to be proactive. We got to get out of this reactionary, knee
Mhm,
jerk
mhm.
response thing, like we
Right.
used to say in the military. And
Mhm,
so this has been such a wonderful
mhm.
conversation, Dr. Hickman, and it needs to continue. And
Yeah.
again, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Dr. Cynthia J Hickman, and we're talking about keeping the elderly in their homes. We've got to have the conversations with them. We've
Mhm.
got to, well, I'm gonna let you do the closeout. Let me do my announcements, and then I'm gonna have you
Okay.
do the last minute advice. Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
Okay.
So I want to remind everyone that this show will be available on YouTube at Life Matters with Michele TV official. That is Life Matters with Michele TV official. You can watch it, same day. Well, give me a couple hours or what have you. It'll be up there. But you can also listen every Friday at 4 o'clock p.m. on sensationalsoundsradio.net. Once again, Life Matters with Michele is available on radio every Friday at 4 o'clock p.m. on Sensational Sounds radio.net. I am also looking for guests for 2022. We're going to switch it up a little bit, but I still need guests for 2022 to come on the show. If you're interested, please visit my website at www.im-mij.com /contact us, and just click on the Life Matters with Michele, and it'll send me a message. Also want to remind you all to order your copy of my two latest books that just came out:
Mhm.
Boots and Beyond, Stories of Trials, Tragedy, Triumph, and Transition, and my newest book that is dropping on tomorrow, which is My Bald is Beautiful, I Am Not My Hair. Both of them. Yes, Dr. Hickman has her copy. Thank you for holding that up for me. And the cost is $20 for each one of them. You can certainly send me an email at Michele at im-mij.com. That's Michele. My name only has one L in it, at im-mij.com, and I will send you the purchase link. All right, Dr. Hickman, bring us on home. Give us some final advice before we close out the show.
All right. For those who may not know, I am your proactive caregiver advocate, and there's a reason for that. I've spent 20 years being a caregiver to my mom, my wonderful queen, Shibbolethia B. Lewis, who died in 2017 in our home for 20 years. And I tell people that because I want you to know my mother died at 97. My siblings say that my mother lived a long life because I was proactive in her care. So I'm asking you to be proactive. Just take one step. or one nugget that I shared today, and start there. I love the fact that Michelle talked about her 28-year-old son, because that is the age that I want you all to start paying attention. I want you all to recognize that we're all pilgrims passing through, and ain't none of us gonna get out of here alive. So we might as well be prepared. And being prepared means change might happen. Change might need to happen. And the more we embrace the reality of older adults aging in place with you, we have to realize that we have to be empathetic enough to know that it's necessary for us to take care of our elders. It's necessary for us, African American communities, and those alike, to take care of us. My mother took care of me. Your mother took care of you. And it's your responsibility to take care of your parents as they age. I wish you well. Bless you.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Cynthia Hickman, for joining me today on Life Matters. Well, I am your host, Michele, of Life Matters with Michele. I hope you all have enjoyed the show on today. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you again next time. God bless and have a wonderful week.